On December 5, 1872, near the Azores, the Dei Gratia sighted a brigantine under sail. She moved as if manned, yet answered no signals. From a distance, she looked like any working vessel crossing the Atlantic. But when men from the Dei Gratia climbed aboard, they found the deck silent. The name on the stern was the Mary Celeste. No captain stood at the wheel, and no sailors answered from below. Benjamin Briggs was gone, along with his wife, his young daughter, and the 7-man crew who had left New York weeks earlier. Hull, sails, cargo, and provisions remained intact. 10 people were missing. The ship itself was sound. That contrast turned the Mary Celeste into maritime folklore, inspiring tales of meals still warm on tables and crews vanishing mid-stride. Court records leave a colder inventory. A logbook abruptly halted, an empty boat chock, a dismantled pump, commercial alcohol in the hold, and testimony taken once the vessel reached Gibraltar. Beyond where the crew went lies the physical evidence the boarding party actually encountered, and how much of the ghost ship was invented after the Atlantic had swallowed its witnesses. Start with the clue everyone remembers. A ship drifting, the crew gone, food still steaming, tea still warm in the cups. It feels like an instant disappearance. People interrupted mid-motion. The original record does not give us that. The boarding accounts give no solid basis for hot food on the table or tea warm enough to prove the crew had left only minutes before. That image belongs to later storytelling, especially Arthur Conan Doyle's 1884 short story J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, published more than a decade after the Mary Celeste was found. Conan Doyle was writing fiction. The scene was memorable enough to drift backward into the case, until many people remembered it as evidence. Removing it does not drain the mystery. It leaves fewer distractions between us and the ship itself. Now the investigation has to rest on colder things. Boarding testimony, Gibraltar court records, the logbook, the missing boat, the pump, the cargo, and the condition of the vessel itself. Without the steaming meals, the Mary Celeste is no longer a story about people vanishing in the middle of dinner. It becomes a harder question. Why was a real ship, found by real sailors, moving through the Atlantic with no one left aboard? Stripping away the folklore leaves a harder problem. The boarding party found a seaworthy vessel with ample provisions and no obvious structural failure. A shattered hull or a burning deck explains panic, but the Mary Celeste was sound, stocked, and sailing on her own. The critical missing element lay on deck. The single yawl boat was gone. Captain Briggs, his family, and the crew had taken it. That detail reframes the mystery. Why abandon a stable brigantine for an open boat on the North Atlantic? The logbook narrows the window. Its final entry was made on November 25, 1872, 9 days before the Dei Gratia intercepted the ship. Sometime during that interval, Briggs decided the Mary Celeste was too dangerous to remain aboard. The rationale for that decision was not on the open deck, but in the hold below. In the hold, the physical evidence centers on cargo, bilge water, and a dismantled pump. The Mary Celeste carried 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol bound for Genoa. During the salvage survey in Gibraltar, 9 barrels were found empty. While that does not confirm a sudden explosion, it points to leaked liquid and vapor pooling in an unventilated wooden hold. Without instrumentation, Briggs had to judge the risk from fumes, heat, and shifting cargo. Then there was the bilge. Rescuers sounded roughly 3.5 feet of water in the hold, alongside a pump that had been taken apart. In rough seas, 3 feet of water was manageable for a brigantine, but with a disassembled pump, gauging whether the inflow was worsening became nearly impossible. If the sounding rod gave misleading readings or the pump failed, the ship's condition would have appeared critical. What later proved to be a manageable amount of bilge water could easily have looked like progressive flooding. Together, vapor in the hold, an unreliable pump, and rising water created compounding pressure, a scenario where taking to the yawl may have seemed, however briefly, like the safer choice. The clues now begin to line up. The missing lifeboat points to action, not disappearance. The people aboard the Mary Celeste most likely left the ship voluntarily, under pressure, because the vessel seemed dangerous in that moment. For Briggs, the warning signs would not have arrived as a solved case file. They would have arrived as fragments: leaking alcohol cargo, uncertain water below, a pump that could not be trusted, and open Atlantic weather around a small sailing vessel. None proves the exact trigger. Together, they create a plausible emergency. The key word is temporary, not escape, temporary. A permanent abandonment makes less sense of what was left behind. A temporary evacuation does. Briggs may have ordered his wife, his daughter, and the crew into the ship's boat to put distance between themselves and whatever they feared aboard Mary Celeste. The larger vessel was still their real chance of survival. The lifeboat may have been meant as a waiting place, not a final escape. One physical clue gives that reconstruction its shape. The main halyard was found broken and trailing. It does not tell us exactly what happened, and no survivor described the moment, but it supports the possibility that the boat had been attached to the ship and that the connection was lost. At sea, that single loss could change everything. If the Mary Celeste moved on under sail while the small boat fell behind, the people who had stepped away from danger would suddenly be separated from shelter, water, food, and height above the waves. The ship that seemed unsafe could become unreachable. The boat chosen as a temporary refuge could become the place from which no one returned. This explanation does not require ghosts. It does not require proven violence. It requires a captain making a hard decision with incomplete information and one thin line between survival and open water. The exact trigger remains unknown. Fumes, pump trouble, misleading water readings, weather, or some combination. But the shape of the tragedy is clearer. The Mary Celeste did not simply lose its people. Its people most likely left it and then lost their way back. At the edge of the missing lifeboat, the trail should have narrowed. In Gibraltar, it widened again. After the De Gratia crew brought the Mary Celeste into port, the empty ship became a salvage case. A vessel rescued at sea could mean a reward, and that meant the rescuer's account would be tested in court. In the Vice Admiralty proceedings, officials pressed on darker possibilities: piracy, violence, fraud. Each was investigated as suspicion, not established as fact. The strongest suspicion came from Attorney General Solly Flood, whose pursuit of foul play theories helped cast a longer shadow over the case. But suspicion is not proof. The hearings explored murder, piracy, and fraud. They did not establish them as fact. That distinction matters because Gibraltar added a second life to the mystery. The physical clues point back to a decision aboard the Mary Celeste: a missing boat, perceived danger, possible separation at sea. The court record adds a second layer: doubt. Once that doubt entered the file, later retellings had room to expand. Rescuers could be recast as suspects. The empty ship could be turned into a crime scene. Gaps in the record could be filled with whatever a storyteller needed. Gibraltar explains why suspicion survived. It does not prove that suspicion was true. What can the Mary Celeste honestly tell us? Less than legend promises, more than a ghost story needs. The known facts do not need embellishment. The ship was found empty and usable, with provisions aboard. Its lifeboat was missing. The last log left a gap before discovery. Below deck were troubling clues: industrial alcohol cargo with signs of leakage, a disassembled pump, and reported water in the hold. In Gibraltar, the rescue became a suspicious court case, but murder, piracy, and fraud were not proven. The strongest reconstruction is practical, not paranormal. The people aboard most likely left voluntarily because something made the ship seem unsafe. They may have expected the move into the lifeboat to be temporary. If that boat then separated from the Mary Celeste, caution could become catastrophe very quickly. What the record does not preserve is the final human moment. It does not tell us whether the decisive fear was vapor from the cargo, confusion over the water level, pump trouble, weather, or a combination that looked worse from the deck than it looks from a file. The steaming meals belong to myth. Ghosts are not supported by the evidence. A proven crime is not in the record. What remains is narrower and sadder. A seaworthy ship that survived, and the people who left it disappearing into the part of the story no document reached. One more log entry might have changed everything. A recovered lifeboat might have told us how long they stayed with the ship, or when the line between caution and catastrophe finally broke. Instead, the Mary Celeste sailed on without them, an empty vessel carrying the shape of an answer, but not the final words.